Within the socio-ecological model, the perceived environment contains key 5 aspects: safety, attractiveness, accessibility, convenience, and comfort. Taking these factors into account, an environmental audit was performed. The key criteria for the investigation was the criteria was based upon Humple, Owen and Leslie's study, which suggests an association between access to facilities such as cycleways, active footpaths, swim-in locations, and which increase physical activity levels. Other studies also suggest that neighbourhood variables such as sidewalk availability, sufficient street lights, and are strong indicators for physical activity compared to availability of parks. There is also a positive relationship between the absence of traffic and physical activity levels, which has been investigated.
Our chosen method of data collection was to do an environmental audit of Mornington and Narre Warren. We also went for a run around both of these areas to experience them firsthand and collect some data and footage. We used journal articles to back up our data and compare them with the two suburbs.
However, it is important to note that it is difficult to isolate environmental factors such as access as objective measures of participation. It's immensely impacted by the behavioural setting, so that's why we have included safety as a parameter. Although not a physical aspect of the physical environment, it is reasonably related to the physical environment as it impacts people's decisions to exercise.
Just went for a run for our community assignment. Did about 10k around Mornington, went through the beach area, up through the residential and across the main part and back around, just to get an overview of the area and what it's all like. And we've got some footage of it for you. The aim of this run was to experience Mornington firsthand and determine the effect of its environment on the motivation of an individual. Mornington is located by the beach. Studies are showing that living in close proximity to coastal areas is associated with meeting the recommended levels of exercise. The streets of Mornington were all equipped with wide, maintained and clearly marked paths, making it easy to run or walk in almost any area without having to share the road with cars. Structural constraints play a role in the participation and motivation of an individual, so it was good to be able to get around. As I ran along the beachfront, there were plenty of paths that were designed specifically for runners and walkers. These paths also had many access paths to the beach and park areas. In a study conducted by Perry, Salems and Thompson, 88% of girls and 89% of boys claimed to use local parks for physical activity. Enhanced access was also associated with high levels of participation in vigorous activity regardless of one's socio-economic status. On my audit of Mornington, I came across many available facilities such as public bathrooms, rest stops and drinking fountains. Lack of facilities available were found to be an indicator of non-participation by individuals in a study conducted by Seren, Leslie, Sugiyama and Owen. This lack of facilities was found to be a barrier to participating in physical activity and lessen the motivation of the participant. The whole time I was running, I was surrounded by trees, parks, beach and grass. It was an aesthetically pleasing and calming outdoor environment. Environmental factors such as appearance of area and environment were found to have an impact on the motivation of an individual. Individuals were less likely to be participating in an unattractive environment. Enjoyment and intention have been identified as potential motivators for physical activity and participation. Higher ratings of these motivators have been found to occur when an individual is engaging in a pleasant outdoor environment. When comparing the footage from both Mornington and Narre Warren, it's obvious that Mornington is more of an outdoor environment, whilst Narre Warren is enclosed, full of buildings, graffiti and concrete. Unsafe neighbourhoods are associated with higher levels of inactivity. The path that I took around Mornington was open and well used. There were plenty of people around and the area felt safe and secure.
Narre Warren, according to an online walkability test, is rated a walker's paradise, scoring a 90 out of 100. But just how walkable is it? I set about exploring the perceived environment, that is Narre Warren, just to see how walkable it really was. There is a train station located in Narre Warren, which can be regarded as a potential hazard. It's very noisy and can interfere with a leisurely run if a train happens to pass by. The station is also heavily graffitied, which creates a sort of eerie feeling when you run past. The gates and various walking barriers create a feeling of entrapment, like you are directed to only move in a certain way, with no freedom. These factors significantly decrease the aesthetic feel of the run or walk, which studies show to be a big barrier to one's want to partake in physical activity. Narre Warren has a pedestrian walkway that leads you straight to a bottle shop, which can attract undesirable people. This can furthermore decrease the aesthetic feel and may deter the use of the walking path, as unsociable people await on the opposing side. There's a roundabout which is heavily used by vehicles that don't give way to pedestrians. In fact, it is quite the opposite. Pedestrians are to give way to cars. When I attempted to cross the roundabout, I had to wait for 4 cars to pass, and that only got me halfway through the roundabout before I had to stop again to ensure no other cars will pass. Whilst attempting to cross the main highway in Narre Warren, you are exposed to heavy traffic congestions. Cars travel at speeds of 80 kilometres, which creates a feeling of vulnerability and an unsafe atmosphere. This again can significantly deter people from running or walking around the area. Whilst waiting to cross the highway, I waited approximately a minute and a half before I was only allowed to cross halfway through the highway, as oncoming traffic was allowed to continue to drive through. Walkways that are considered safe for walking and are easy to access are associated with higher usage as opposed to those that are congested with obstacles. There were several obstacles that disrupted the flow of my run. This included hard rubbish, which spilled onto the footpaths, and unattended construction equipment, which are both structural constraints, therefore having a negative effect to one's experiences.
The walkability of the contrasting neighbourhoods was investigated throughout the audit and corresponds with several studies that suggest a greater engagement in physical activity within more walkable neighbourhoods. Neighbourhood walkability is the extent in which characteristics of the physical environment may be advantageous to locals in the area who use the walkways for leisure, exercise or active transport.
Narre Warren's walkability score is 90%, which is gauged fairly highly and actually seen to be a walker's paradise, but going out there in the field and conducting an audit, it is actually the exact opposite. So despite Narre Warren being a walker's paradise, it's not for the following reasons. There were construction sites which had unattended equipment, which could be potentially dangerous. Also had hard rubbish filling and blocking the walkways. It also lacked natural sort of environment like greenery, such as trees.
The walkability score of Mornington was 98%, which is quite high. I thought that was a pretty accurate reading from what I experienced there. It was good because it was pretty open and well set out. It was lots of trees and greenery around. The area felt safe and there was lots of facilities available. In contrast to Narre Warren, Mornington was much more likely to produce motivation within an individual to participate in the area from the data that we got from our readings.
It's also important to note that statistics don't always tell the truth, so going out into the field and getting a feel for it is a much better test.
Thanks for watching our little presentation, and I hope you enjoyed our audit.
The walkability of the contrasting neighbourhood. The walkability of the contrasting The walkability of the contrasting neighbourhoods was investigated throughout the audit. Oh, come on, I was good that time.
I'm sorry.
The walkability of the contrast. The walkability of the contrasting neighbourhoods was investigated throughout the audit. As soon as I looked, the walkability of the contrasting neighbourhoods. He's not even looking.
The walkability of Mornington was at 98%. The walkability score of Mornington was at 98%. The walkability of Mornington was at 98%, and that's a pretty high score.
Oh, dude. So the
It's not around 90%, it's 90%.